Wind scraped across a lonely ridge in what is now southeastern Turkey nearly 12,000 years ago. There were no cities, no farms, no pottery workshops or written records. Human beings moved in small bands, hunting gazelle, gathering wild grains, surviving season to season. And yet on that ridge, massive limestone pillars were being carved, lifted, and arranged in precise circles. Each pillar stood taller than a man. Each weighed up to 20 tons. The site we now call Göbekli Tepe should not exist in the world it emerged from. There are no hearths there, no houses, no storage pits filled with grain. The evidence suggests it was not a settlement, but a ritual complex. Hundreds of people must have gathered to quarry, shape, and raise those stones. That level of coordination implies leadership, planning, shared belief, and a surplus of food strong enough to support laborers who were not hunting at that moment. It challenges the old idea that agriculture created religion. It hints that shared belief may have created agriculture instead. A temple before the town, ceremony before civilization. Travel forward thousands of years and across an ocean to central Mexico. A vast city once stood there, aligned to the heavens with astonishing precision. We call it Teotihuacan. At its height, it housed over 100,000 people. Its streets followed a strict grid, angled carefully to celestial events. The Pyramid of the Sun rises over a natural cave, deliberately incorporated into the design. The city feels planned from the beginning, not grown organically. And yet, when later civilizations arrived, even they did not know who built it. Its founders' language and identity remain uncertain. The monuments stand, but the names are gone. Beneath the plains of central Turkey, another mystery descends into darkness. Derinkuyu stretches downward through volcanic rock, level after level, deep enough to shelter tens of thousands. Ventilation shafts bring air from the surface to the lowest chambers. Stone doors roll shut from the inside. Wells provide water independent of the outside world. It was not a simple refuge. It was engineered for survival on a large scale. The question is not whether people could carve soft rock. The question is, who first imagined carving an entire city underground and calculated the airflow before the first shaft was cut? In southern England, stones traveled 200 miles to become part of Stonehenge. The smaller blue stones came from distant Welsh hills, quarried, transported, erected, rearranged over centuries. They were chosen deliberately. Their source mattered. Their sound may have mattered. When struck, some ring like bells. The monument is not only aligned to the sun, but shaped by intention layered across generations. Why move those stones so far when others lay closer? The answer cannot be laziness. It must be meaning. High in the Andes, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman overlooks Cusco. Its walls are built from enormous polygonal stones, fitted together so precisely that a knife blade cannot slip between them. No mortar binds them. Earthquakes have shaken the region for centuries, yet the joints remain tight. Spanish chroniclers recorded that even the Inca attributed the oldest sections to a people before them. The technique appears fully formed, not experimental. It is engineering expressed as art, strength expressed as geometry. Across the ocean on Easter Island, nearly 900 statues were carved from volcanic stone and moved across the landscape. Some remain half-finished in the quarry, revealing the sequence of creation. Others once stood on carefully constructed platforms facing inland. Then, at some point, every standing statue was toppled. The society that raised them endured isolation on one of the most remote inhabited places on Earth. They navigated vast distances by reading stars and swells. They encoded memory in stone. And then, something shifted. In southern Africa, Great Zimbabwe rose as a stone capital without mortar, without metal reinforcement, built by local African people engaged in trade reaching China and Persia. Its massive walls curve gracefully, engineered with inward lean to distribute weight. For decades, outsiders insisted it could not have been built by the people who lived there. Archaeology proved otherwise. The greater mystery is not who built it, but why its story was nearly erased. And then, there is the Great Pyramid of Giza. Its base is level to within centimeters. Its alignment to true north is astonishingly precise. The internal chambers and relieving systems show sophisticated understanding of weight distribution. Mathematical relationships within its proportions have sparked debate for generations. Was it purely a tomb? Was it something more? The void discovered above the Grand Gallery remains unexplored. We know how to describe its measurements. We do not fully agree on its purpose. Each of these sites, taken alone, has a plausible explanation. Human beings are capable of extraordinary feats when motivated by belief, necessity, or ambition. Organized labor over time can accomplish wonders. But when viewed together across continents and millennia, patterns begin to echo. Monumental architecture aligned to the sky, precision beyond immediate survival needs, knowledge preserved in stone long after names fade. The honest answer is not that ancient people possessed magic. It is that we may underestimate how deep organized knowledge runs in our past. Civilizations rise, flourish, collapse. Memory fragments. Techniques are forgotten and rediscovered. What looks like sudden genius may be inheritance from chapters of history we have not yet uncovered. On that windswept hill in Turkey, pillars were carved and then deliberately buried. In Mexico, a city rose and fell, leaving monuments without founders. Underground, stone corridors still breathe air through shafts cut thousands of years ago. Across oceans and deserts, human beings shape the world in ways that force us to ask better questions. The stones remain. The answers are still emerging. If you stand long enough inside the ruins of any of these places, a strange feeling sets in. It is not mystery in the romantic sense. It is scale. The scale of time, the scale of labor, the scale of intention. We tend to imagine the ancient world as simple because its tools were simple. Stone, bone, wood. But simplicity of tools does not equal simplicity of mind. At Göbekli Tepe, the pillars are not rough. They are shaped with deliberate geometry. Some bear arms carved in low relief, hands folded across stylized bodies. They are not just stones. They are beings rendered in abstraction. That level of symbolic thinking did not appear suddenly. It developed somewhere, over generations we cannot see. And the most unsettling detail remains this. The entire complex was intentionally buried. Not destroyed in panic, not eroded naturally, carefully filled in, as if sealed. In Teotihuacan, the city grid replicates itself at multiple scales. The same orientation repeats in temples, in courtyards, in the Grand Avenue of the Dead. Planning of that magnitude implies survey methods, standardized units, and authority strong enough to impose design across miles of construction. Beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, archaeologists found liquid mercury placed deliberately underground. Mercury does not gather there naturally. It was transported, poured, positioned with ritual intent. Knowledge of materials, knowledge of symbolism. Derinkuyu's ventilation shafts are not random holes. They are distributed in a way that sustains airflow across multiple levels. Even modern engineers who study the structure acknowledge the effectiveness of the design. The system works because someone understood that hot air rises and cooler air descends. Convection before textbooks. Experience refined into architecture. And the tunnels connecting separate underground cities suggest coordination beyond a single community. Stonehenge's bluestones were moved more than once. They were erected in Wales, dismantled, carried, and reassembled on Salisbury Plain. That decision required more than brute strength. It required continuity of belief, generations willing to continue a project they did not begin, a cultural memory stable enough to survive centuries. At Sacsayhuaman, the stones interlock in ways that resist seismic shock. The joints are irregular but precise, forcing each block to depend on its neighbors. The walls curve subtly, absorbing force rather than fighting it. It is not simply stacking rock. It is anticipating movement, designing for instability in a world that shakes. On Easter Island, experiments have shown that statues could be walked upright using ropes and coordinated motion. The method works. But method alone does not explain the scale of commitment. Hundreds of statues carved, transported, erected. Platforms engineered with careful alignment. Petroglyphs carved into sections that would be buried underground once raised. Messages hidden within foundations. Information meant to endure unseen. Great Zimbabwe's conical tower stands solid. Function uncertain. Not storage, not defense. A symbol in stone at the heart of a trading capital connected to global networks. Engineering knowledge applied without mortar, without steel, relying purely on weight, balance, and graded stonework. And the Great Pyramid remains an anchor point in the conversation. Not because it is alien, not because it defies physics, but because its precision continues to press against the limits of what we comfortably assume about the Bronze Age. surveying techniques capable of aligning massive structures to cardinal directions with extraordinary accuracy, organizational systems capable of mobilizing thousands consistently over decades, stone cut and placed with tolerances that still impress engineers. None of this requires supernatural explanations, but none of it deserves dismissal either. The tendency to swing between impossible and obvious misses the deeper truth. Human knowledge accumulates unevenly. It accelerates, it fragments, it disappears. Entire literate cultures have collapsed within historical memory. Libraries burned, oral traditions severed. If that can happen in recorded history, imagine how much more could vanish in prehistory. There is also the problem of convergence. Monumental architecture aligned to celestial cycles appears in cultures separated by oceans. Polygonal stone fitting emerges in distant regions. Underground construction repeats in landscapes shaped by threat or climate. Are these independent solutions to shared human concerns? Possibly. Humans everywhere watch the same sky, feel the same earthquakes, face the same need to organize, protect, remember. But what ties them together is not technique alone. It is intention beyond survival. These structures required time diverted from food gathering, from daily struggle. They required collective belief strong enough to justify the effort. Whether that belief centered on gods, ancestors, cosmology, or political power, it generated architecture that outlived its creators. The deeper question is not what secret technology they had. It is how stable their knowledge systems were, how information was transmitted without writing in early periods, how apprenticeship, ritual, and oral instruction preserved technical precision across generations. We often underestimate oral cultures because their records are not carved in ink, yet their engineering stands carved in stone. Perhaps the real revision required is not chronological, but psychological. We must adjust our sense of ancient intelligence, replace the image of primitive builders with one of capable observers embedded in environments that demanded awareness. People who tracked stars because seasons depended on it, who shaped stone because stone endured, who built monuments not for tourists, but for continuity. Across 12 millennia, from the first pillars at Göbekli Tepe to the pyramids of Egypt, from underground cities to island statues, one pattern repeats: humans organizing at scale long before modernity. The tools change, the symbols change, the capacity does not. We are still excavating only fragments. Most of Göbekli Tepe remains buried. Vast regions of the ocean floor remain unexplored. Countless sites erode before documentation. What survives is not the full story, only its durable chapters. The past is not a straight line of ignorance to knowledge. It is a landscape of peaks and valleys, advances and collapses. Some heights were reached earlier than we expected. Some knowledge may have been lost and found more than once. The stones do not speak in sentences. They speak in alignments, in angles, in weight and placement. They remind us that human ambition did not begin recently. It began when someone first decided that survival alone was not enough, that meaning required form, and form required effort measured in generations, and we are still reading what they left behind. There is another layer to this story that rarely makes it into textbooks. It is not about lost continents or forgotten super technologies. It is about fragility. Civilizations do not disappear only in fire and invasion. They disappear in drought, in migration, in slow cultural shifts where one generation decides the old rituals no longer matter. Imagine a community that has mapped the stars for centuries. They track solstices with stone markers. They encode seasonal cycles into architecture. Then climate changes, the lake dries, the herds move, the children grow up in a different landscape. The knowledge does not vanish instantly. It thins. It becomes story instead of instruction. After a few generations, the monument remains, but the manual is gone. At Nabta Playa in the Sahara, stones were arranged to mark the summer solstice, thousands of years before the pyramids. The Sahara was once green, dotted with lakes. When the rains shifted and the desert advanced, those pastoral communities moved toward the Nile. What they carried with them was not just cattle. It may have been astronomical tradition, skills and observation refined over centuries and open horizons. Knowledge transfer does not require writing. It requires continuity. Apprentice watching master, child watching parent, ritual reenacted until it becomes memory embedded in muscle. That system is powerful, but it depends on stability. Disrupt the environment and the chain weakens. Underwater off Japan, the Yonaguni Formation sits debated. Whether entirely natural or partly shaped by human hands, it reminds us of a harsh geological truth. Sea levels rose dramatically at the end of the last ice age. Coastlines where early humans thrived are now submerged. If complex settlements existed along those shores, many would now lie beneath hundreds of meters of water. Archaeology favors dry land. The ocean keeps its archives sealed. This is not evidence of lost empires with laser tools. It is a reminder that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially when the evidence may be underwater or eroded beyond recognition. Consider also the psychological lens through which modern archaeology operates. Scholars are trained to avoid sensationalism. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That discipline protects the field from fantasy. But it can also create inertia. Ideas that challenge established sequences face higher scrutiny, sometimes rightly, sometimes reflexively. Göbekli Tepe itself was once dismissed as a medieval cemetery because it did not fit the model of hunter-gatherers. The model changed only when excavation forced it to. That is not conspiracy. That is the slow correction process of science. But it shows how assumptions shape interpretation. When multiple sites across continents display advanced planning, astronomical alignment, and architectural ambition, the safest explanation is independent innovation. Humans everywhere share the same cognitive architecture. We all look up at the same sky. We all notice patterns. We all respond to death, time, and season. Similar needs can produce similar solutions. Yet convergence across oceans still invites curiosity. Why polygonal stone fitting in both the Andes and parts of the Mediterranean? Why cardinal alignments repeated across cultures? Perhaps because straight lines and right angles are universal solutions. Perhaps because the sky offers fixed reference points available to anyone patient enough to measure. Or perhaps because knowledge travels farther than we once assumed. Not through global empires 12,000 years ago, but through gradual contact, trade, migration, and storytelling. Ideas move with people, and people have always moved. We often underestimate prehistoric navigation. Polynesians crossed thousands of kilometers of open ocean, guided only by stars, currents, and bird flight. Genetic evidence confirms contact between South America and Easter Island before Europeans arrived. If oceanic contact occurred in one region, it is possible elsewhere too. Not guaranteed, but possible. Still, the most powerful theme across all these structures is not hidden technology. It is shared human obsession with permanence. Stone is chosen because it endures. Alignment to stars is chosen because stars endure. Underground cities are carved because rock endures. The message is simple. We were here. We understood. We organized. Modern society tends to imagine progress as linear and accelerating. But ancient societies achieved feats that required patience modern culture rarely tolerates. Decades to build a single structure. Generations continuing a project begun by ancestors. Knowledge maintained without written manuals. The real mystery may not be what they knew that we do not. It may be how they sustained collective focus long enough to execute such works without the distractions of modern life. If there were advanced chapters of human history now lost, the evidence would likely look exactly like what we see: fragments, out-of-place precision, techniques appearing fully formed, cultural memories referencing builders from before. But caution is necessary. Gaps in knowledge are invitations to investigate, not to invent. The responsible position is curiosity balanced with restraint, to admit uncertainty without filling it prematurely. We stand in a strange position in history. For the first time, we can compare sites globally in real time. Satellite imagery reveals patterns invisible from the ground. Muon scans peer into sealed chambers. DNA traces ancient migration. The picture is expanding, and as it expands, one conclusion becomes increasingly clear. The past is deeper, more complex, and more interconnected than we were taught in simplified timelines. Not magical, not extraterrestrial, human. 12,000 years ago, hands lifted limestone pillars into circles. 5,000 years ago, stones rose in geometric precision beside the Nile. 2,000 years ago, cities aligned to cosmic grids in Mexico. Across continents, humans organized around ideas powerful enough to mobilize thousands. What they knew was not necessarily secret. It was embedded in practice, in observation, in repetition. And like all human knowledge, it was vulnerable. We are not uncovering a hidden alien blueprint. We are uncovering ourselves, older, more capable, and more persistent than our own myths of primitiveness allowed. The excavation continues, so does the question. Step back even farther. Strip away the names we have given these places. Remove the modern borders, the academic labels, the tourist pathways, and museum plaques. What remains is a species repeatedly reaching beyond immediate survival toward structure, symbol, and scale. There is something deeply human about building in stone. Wood rots, mud erodes, but stone resists time. To choose stone is to choose memory. It is an act of defiance against forgetting. At multiple points in prehistory, humans crossed a threshold. They stopped only reacting to the environment and began reshaping it permanently. Not for shelter alone, but for meaning, ritual centers, astronomical markers, engineered landscapes. These are not accidental byproducts of survival. They are expressions of identity. One possibility rarely emphasized is that many ancient monuments were social technologies, not just religious sites, but tools for cohesion. When hundreds gather to raise a pillar or transport a stone, something else is constructed alongside the architecture. Unity, shared myth, collective identity. The monument becomes proof that cooperation works. In societies without centralized states, ritual gatherings may have been the glue that held large groups together. A seasonal construction effort could align dispersed communities. The same may be true of Teotihuacan's Grand Avenue, or the Great Pyramid's overwhelming scale. Monumentality creates psychological impact. It signals power, stability, cosmic order. It shapes how people think about their place in the universe. But there is another thread running quietly beneath these sites: cycles of collapse. Teotihuacan burned from within. Great Zimbabwe was abandoned. Easter Island statues fell. The Sahara dried and emptied. The underground cities of Cappadocia were sealed and reopened across centuries of threat. Each case reminds us that complexity is not permanent. It must be maintained. We live in a world that often assumes permanence because our cities glow at night from orbit. But history suggests something else. Knowledge can contract. Networks can dissolve. Engineering traditions can fade into myth within a few generations if the social fabric frays. Imagine future archaeologists uncovering fragments of our civilization after thousands of years. Steel corroded, glass shattered, data lost. They might find foundations, road grids, tunnels. They might struggle to reconstruct the invisible systems that powered them: electricity, satellites, digital archives. Without context, precision can look mysterious. Now, invert that perspective. The ancient world we excavate is already filtered by loss. We see foundations without the scaffolding of cultural context. We measure angles without hearing the stories told at their dedication. We calculate astronomical alignments without experiencing the night sky as they did, unpolluted, overwhelming, alive with meaning. Perhaps that is why these sites feel uncanny, not because they are impossible, but because they reveal how much has vanished. There is also a tendency in modern culture to divide knowledge into silos: astronomy separate from architecture, engineering separate from spirituality. Ancient societies did not compartmentalize in the same way. Observing the sky was not abstract science. It was agriculture, navigation, ritual timing, survival. Geometry was not theoretical. It was embodied in walls and platforms. When the Great Pyramid aligns to true north with astonishing accuracy, that does not necessarily imply hidden science fiction technology. It implies patient observation of circumpolar stars, repeated measurement, refinement across years. The sky offers stable reference points to anyone willing to watch long enough. When Nabtaplaya's stones align to solstices, it suggests horizon tracking sustained across generations. When Stonehenge frames the sunrise, it signals continuity of seasonal awareness. These are not miracles, they are disciplined traditions. The uncomfortable realization is that disciplined tradition can rival modern calculation when time and attention are abundant. What we may be confronting across these global monuments is not evidence of a vanished supercivilization, but evidence that human capability plateaued far earlier than we assumed, that the cognitive toolkit required for large-scale coordination, symbolic abstraction, and precise measurement was already in place deep in prehistory. If so, then the story of civilization is less about invention from nothing and more about amplification. Agriculture amplified stability. Writing amplified memory, industry amplified power. But the core capacities, cooperation, pattern recognition, symbolic imagination, were present long before cities. And yet, humility is necessary. There are still voids we cannot explain cleanly, chambers sealed and unexplored, submerged coastlines barely surveyed, cultural gaps where continuity seems interrupted. It is appropriate to say, we do not know, without embarrassment. The most dangerous position is certainty without evidence, in either direction. Dismissing anomalies reflexively is as flawed as declaring them proof of hidden global empires. Archaeology advances slowly because the ground yields information slowly. Every excavation is destructive. Once you dig, context is altered forever. That caution can feel frustrating in an age of instant answers, but it protects the integrity of the record. Across 12,000 years, from early ritual enclosures to engineered pyramids and global trade capitals, one truth emerges clearly. Our ancestors were not primitive caricatures. They were observers, organizers, builders, storytellers. They were capable of patience on a scale we struggle to imagine. The monuments endure because they were meant to endure. They were anchors in time, markers saying, we understood cycles, we faced uncertainty, we gathered and built anyway. The question that remains is not what secret they hid, but what continuity they sought. What did they want to survive them? Belief? Identity? Cosmology? Power? Whatever the answer, the stones still stand, and we are still learning how to read them. Maybe the real mystery was never hidden technology or lost super civilizations. Maybe it was memory. Across thousands of years and continents, human beings gathered, measured the sky, moved impossible stones, carved symbols into rock, and built structures designed to outlast their own lifetimes. Not because they were primitive, not because they were magical, but because they understood something simple and powerful. Survival is temporary. Meaning is not. Göbekli Tepe was buried. Teotihuacan was abandoned. Statues fell on Easter Island. Empires faded in Africa. Yet the stones remain, and that might be the only message they were ever meant to send. We were here. We understood more than you think, and if you look carefully enough, you still can too.